In honor of the inception of our building campaign, I find myself ruminating on holy space, on what the Bayit at 10th and Fraser is to us, and how we are enhancing it. I'm a person sensitive to the poetics of space, particularly created space, in natural settings, in theater, at home. I'm not as interested in beauty as I am in resonance, how a place strikes us, what feelings it evokes, what sensitivities it arouses, what understanding can be born or ratified there. I used to teach a university course in stage effects, and my students once created the feel of a boat pitching in a storm by throwing a light bulb on a long, long cord over some booms very high up and just letting the light swing, the whole space swaying nauseatingly as if we were rocking in harsh waters. I taught a course called The Power of Place, during which a student once evoked the delight of a childhood outing to a brook, playing an audio recording of water gurgling and children laughing, screeching in delight, while we sat with our bare feet on beds of smooth stones in pans of cold water. For me, these were transcendent experiences, lifting me out of time and place, even out of my body. In teaching our capacity to manipulate our experience of space, I came to understand that holy ground is not only tied to innately holy places like the axis mundi, at which biblical Jacob dreamt of a stairway to heaven. We human beings can create holy space through will and sensitivity with patience. Holy space can develop over time based on a history of actions unfolding there. When I was a child, the synagogue we attended was the most special example of the work of an architect now known as the leading theorist of modernist synagogue design. It was awe-inspiringly beautiful, a rich wooden cathedral, its forest setting brought inside by massive untinted windows. Its ritual fabrics, Torah crowns, eternal light, all contributed by the great modernist artists of the 1950s. We might scoff at the formality of such synagogues today, but I'm glad I experienced it as God's house. Of course, my God was a childish concept, enthroned and judgmental. My experience of his house was one of yirah, the double-edged Hebrew word meaning both awe and fear. And I had a summer god, the enthroned God on vacation, who had a summer home, which was my grandparents' cottage in the country. God lived in the narrow Aron Kodesh, built into the bookcases there. He lived among guidebooks on North American trees and mammals and snakes and medicinal plants. But it was vacation, and God also lived in the garden. Indeed, I might have thought he lived everywhere in the summer. The garden was Eden because I was a fanciful child and because my books of fairies and mythology were Torah and Midrash. This wasn't a powerful place of innate God presence like Mount Moriah, where Jacob woke up from his dream, the place that would become the Temple Mount. The garden was a mundane holy place, made holy by my grandfather's landscaping and by the deliberateness with which he introduced summer God to us, waking us each morning so that we could watch the morning glories unfurl and pray the simple morning blessings. Thank you, God, for teaching us to discern between day and night, for order in nature, for making us free, for giving us strength. I knew we were free because my grandparents had escaped from the Nazis. I knew the order of this nature was the result of my family having cleared the land and created this compound. And the garden resonated agency and mazel, luck, and awareness of the majesty of God's created world. The swing of my experience of holy space was decidedly away, has been decidedly away from the formal synagogue setting, growing up to need and create less of the enthroned God and more of a kitchen God, a sick bed God, and ultimately a God who just is, the beingness of being. My sacred spaces are more and more defined by the resonance of interactions in place. The dock on which we dangled our legs in calm water, the table at which there is a history of laughter over grilled cheese sandwiches, the studio where we created those crazy rituals with dry ice to evoke mystical mist, and under my father's tallis when he davened, and in the library, smelling of oiled leather that evoked the learnedness of ancestors, the Seder table, the path of our walk to Shul, if not the edifice of the synagogue itself. I've come to understand that this is the nature of diasporic holy space, not intrinsically sacred, but invested by us with spirit. When Jacob woke up after dreaming of the ladder, he exclaimed, "Ma nora hamakom hazeh." How awesome is this place? Ein zeh ki im beit Elohim, zeh sha'ar hashamayim. This is none other than the house of God and a portal to the heavens. He had inadvertently slept at a holy site, an axis of the rotation of celestial spheres. Ancients believed that at such sites it was possible to meet God, an umpalus of the universe, like a belly button where heaven met earth, where the umbilical cord of the cosmos ushered divine spirit into human space. For the Israelites, this meant that the Jerusalem temple was the one place where a worshiper could be assured of encountering the Almighty. And we continue to experience a semblance of this innate power of sacred place when we feel the warmth of the stones of the Western Wall, as some report, sensing its holy aliveness as both uncanny and real. Part of the great tragedy of the destruction of the temples was loss of home. The Zohar poignantly couches the destruction of the temple in terms of homelessness and a family torn asunder. Whereas Shekhinah once had a tangible home, now the indwelling God roams adrift, living where we, her wandering children, let her into our hearts. We tend to think of Jewish sacred architecture as referring almost exclusively to the temple, erected on their holy site. But our original humanly made sacred space moved with us, nomadic, because we were then nomadic. After the incident of the golden calf, God realized that the Israelites needed some visible, touchable manifestation of God and God's presence. An object ostensibly filled with God's presence was not the answer. But God offered the tangibility of circumscribed space dedicated to the human-divine interaction. So, a building campaign was announced, and all brought free will offerings according to their capacities. A design was announced, artisans appointed, and the tabernacle was created, God assuring, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Build me a sanctuary, and I will rest in their midst. In the Torah's narrative, this was meant literally. But soon after the loss of Jerusalem, the notion of an indwelling God became metaphorical. God living in us. In the internal sanctuaries, we each have the ability to create inviting havens for spirit. The new interpretation, introduced as early as Philo and preached as late as the Hasidic masters, served beautifully. No matter what destruction we might live through in the harsh diasporic world, no matter how many Kristallnachts, our cathedrals can never again be destroyed because they're not material structures. Mystics and poets, both medieval and modern, have been nourished by that notion of an inward journey into God's house, of the human heart as God's true dwelling. During the days of awe, we sing daily, "One thing I ask of Adonai, that is what I seek. May I dwell in the house of God all the days of my life." The intent of the verse has become quite entirely spiritualized. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch took it a little farther, teaching, the psalm doesn't mean that we should actually dwell in the house of God all the days of our lives. Even the Kohanim didn't live in the temple permanently. The expression comes to say that if we sanctify our lives, then every single place becomes a Beit Adonai, a house of God. Every place where God's Torah is observed with strength and purity. Then our earthly life becomes a chariot for God's presence, and God has a place to dwell on earth. Despite the many beautiful synagogues across the globe and over time, our emphasis on being sanctuaries and on God's home as everywhere has developed into a tradition of Jewish antipathy for art and architecture. We live in the tension between elevating the ineffable and our desire to demonstrate love for our tradition of liturgy and ritual by enhancing the mitzvot and acting them with beauty. Indeed, beautifying the mitzvot, hidur mitzvah, is a mitzvah in itself. Hidur mitzvah is our aesthetic enhancement of a mitzvah, a way to put our own spin, our own imprint on a mitzvah, signifying that it's not a generic offering or a rote obligation, rather a personal gesture imbued with particular significance, elevated in intention, meant to please, delight, wow the Creator, and to sacralize the human moment. So we write melodies, we sing in harmony, we buy the best wine, the most beautiful etrog. We create celebratory moments. We bury our damaged holy books in our own garden, planting bulbs on top. We invest in artist-made ritual objects and teach our children the delight of crafting our own Torah mantles and ark curtain and mezuzot and tzedakah boxes and kiddush cups. We bake mishloach manot for our neighbors, invite creation of new interpretive liturgies. We take our prayer out into nature. We paint our sukkah panels with meaningful verses and fill the sanctuary with the smell of rose wreaths, crowning our Torahs on Shavuot, and the smell of honey when we supply beeswax tapers to all in lighting our dozens of personal Chanukiot. There is a clear place for sensual beauty in our religious lives. As pleasing as our refurbished synagogue will be, we're not looking for grandeur in our renovation project. We're not looking to inspire awe with splendor. We seek something more modest, if equally evocative. The particular power of place that we seek to enhance is its quality of home, an island of intimacy, safety, authenticity, and belonging. At the end of an Exploring Judaism class, I once asked the students what they'd enjoyed most over the course of the year. I was surprised when Mira Orek answered that what she liked best was learning her way around the Or Shalom kitchen, preparing and cleaning up our snacks. And what I learned from her is yes, that sense of feeling comfortably and usefully at home is a seminal part of the liturgy, part of the magic. So, we'll update our kitchen, making it more enjoyable to work in. We'll correct the acoustics of our social hall so that we can better enjoy conversation around the tables. We'll install French doors in the hall, imbuing it with grace as an indoor-outdoor space. And we'll make both the hall and the terrace barrier-free, leveling the yard and installing an elevator. Never having had any classrooms, we'll invest in enclosed spaces for intellectual and spiritual exploration, for the meeting of our minds, for informal sharing of joys and sorrow. We will finally have space in which we can create holy messes, closing the door on an unfinished project without having to put everything away every time. Our present undertaking is to attach saddlebags of homey functionality to our spiritual space without changing the sanctuary itself. While I can't say that the Bayit sanctuary is an intrinsic umbilicus where divine power is ushered into human space, it is surely a place historically layered with human-divine interaction, enriched by a patina of human longing for and cleaving to the one, that carries the fullness of Or Shalom's communal religious experiences, as well as the residue of a congregational prayer life in the church that lived there over the preceding decades. If not innately spiritual, it's a space richly seasoned with the still small voices of story and prayer, witness to human faith and perseverance, vibrating with spiritual resonance. We are wise not to touch that sanctuary, to maintain it as it is, for its depth, for its gravitas, for its chi. and will build on for breadth and fresh possibility to support new challenges and new vitalities as yet unexplored, for room to stretch expressively in all realms. We will become the next version of Or Shalom, supported by the traditions alive in the very physicality of our preserved core space. We will become more complex, more open, more exploratory, precisely because we value what is at the center of our building and at the center of our mission as a house of prayer. Similar to the verse from Psalm 27, Shivti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai, it is my desire to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Psalm 23 declares, Vishavti beveit Adonai la'orech yamim. I will dwell in the house of Adonai for the length of days. As Psalm 23 speaks of walking through the valley of the shadow of death, this particular iteration of dwelling in God's house is thought to refer to the afterlife, living with God in an Edenic realm through the eternal life that follows this life on earth. I want to conclude holding that verse in mind, because we have already consciously invested in extending the principle of belonging, so important to us, in the Bayit, a few blocks south to our cemetery. There we can be buried with family regardless of their Jewish status, ensuring that the values upon which our spiritual home in life are built also underlie our spiritual home in death. May we continue to permeate the Or Shalom Bayit with layers of spiritual experience. May we continue to nourish and be nourished by sacred interactions within the confines of a safety that we create. May we make beauty and be beauty. And may we be sanctuaries, the holies of holies, within our brick and mortar synagogue. Gemar Chatima Tova.